Now, years ago, when I first started doing Stars End, I started doing the show in 1980. The show was founded in 1976, but I became a listener in 1977 or 1978 and became part of the staff in the spring of 1980. And at that time, there were 4 or 5 people doing the program in the same time slot. They were doing the program on a rotation, so you'd have a DJ who would come in and do the show just once a month, and that's how I started out on the air here at WXPN, doing programs and doing Stars End, and just coming in once a month. And and I would listen carefully to the other DJs as much as I could. It was late at night, and I would check the playlist logs and try to take notes about the broadcasts, or speak to people, speak to the other hosts and find out what kind of music I should be listening to or discovering. And it was an amazing time to learn about all this stuff. It really changed my life for the better, having gone all through that. But my point is that each broadcast, each DJ brought a different tone or a different atmosphere to their broadcast. And over the years, I guess the hours, took its toll on the DJs, or maybe the other hosts just lost interest. They didn't have a sustained interest in this kind of music, and so eventually there were just 2 DJs doing Stars End. It was myself and Dave Mayer. And then when Dave Mayer moved away to New York to go to graduate school, it was just myself, and it was very difficult. I couldn't imagine just doing it every week, because for one thing, it would cut down on the diversity, because by having all the different DJs, even though it was not all that uniform every week, the broadcast had slight differences. It was interesting to listen to each DJ and hear how they presented the program and what their interpretation of Stars End was, and what music they decided to play. Like when John Andrews would do the show, there'd be a lot of extra jazz cuts. Or when Dave Mayer did the show, now I'm just generalizing, of course. He played a lot of shorter tracks that were ambient in nature. That he didn't really go in for the sequencer music all that much. Sometimes, a fair amount, but that seemed to be the one of the characteristics of his program. And so on and so forth with every DJ. There was pretty interesting roster of DJs over the years. Quite an interesting group of people. So by just narrowing it down to just me, having it just me be responsible for each broadcast every week, at that point, I was afraid that it would narrow the scope of the program. The playlists would not be so diverse, or I don't know. It just seemed like in public radio, you just shouldn't. At least the way the WXPN was set up back in the volunteer days, and a long time ago, it didn't seem like you should just have one point of view or one DJ in every day. To present the music. It was better having many different people try to interpret the format in their own way. But I think what happened when I started doing the show by myself, I think I was able to make it more consistent then, and so that made the show a little bit, the experience of that made listening to the show a little bit different. The experience was a little bit different because you just had the same guy every week coming in to do it, me. And I really tried to really push, really learn about as much about space music and as much about ambient music as I could. I felt a responsibility to the listener to try to do the most diverse shows possible. And back in the 80s and 90s, that meant going to record stores or combing through mail order catalogs and stuff like that. It's different now with the internet. Being able to find music I guess it has its pros and cons, but it seems like it has really opened up the floodgates. There's so much electronic and space music and music appropriate for Star's End coming out. It continues to be an interesting process, to find that stuff and work it into the broadcast each week. At WXPN, I was a DJ for the program Star's End, starting in the spring of 1980. But I really wanted to become a DJ or a music host for this other program called Diaspar. And in order to, no matter what, I had to learn, no matter what show I was going to be on, I was going to have to learn a lot more about music, because I knew some things, but that it was really a great experience to learn about not just all this different kinds of space music and electronic music and progressive rock music, but in order to do a good show with Diaspar, I had to learn about jazz. And I didn't know anything about jazz. I knew about like Dixieland jazz that my father liked, or like, big band jazz from listening at home with my folks. But I had to learn about, all this weird stuff that I didn't really like very much. The Yard Ensemble of Chicago, I could hardly sit through listening to that. But I had the patience and the perseverance to learn about it, or about avant-garde music, or about classical music, or about folk music, or international folk music. And XPN had all these music libraries, and back in 1980, that was really an amazing thing to have. Of course, I guess we all just took it for granted, but it was an amazing resource to have 3 or 4 rooms full of albums from all around the world and from all different categories and aesthetics. So it really changed my view of the world, and it changed my life it made me a bigger, better person by realizing that there's value in this music that I didn't understand. Now, how many people do you know will find an album that they really can't stand and sit in a room for 35 or 40 minutes and listen to the whole album? Nobody does that. People hear something they don't like and they turn it off right away. Now, I think there's some, I don't understand this whole process, but the more you listen to something, the more it grows on you and the more you like it. It's just the way music works. And I guess that's the secret of top 40 radio, or the mainstream radio, is that, by shuffling in these 40 hits throughout the course of the day, you might not like it the first time you heard it, but maybe by the 10th time you heard it, it's like your favorite song in the whole world. Well, anyway, I had to do that with, all this really out jazz, and it made me a bigger, better person, because I applied that to the world after that. And I applied it to people and news, things that I read or saw on the news, and other cultures and other countries, and to just slow my judgment, or to try to find out what the meaning of this is. Because as a human being, if you don't understand something, or something seems unpalatable the first time you experience it, you're not going to go back for more. That's the way I think that's the way an average person works. And so, I really feel good to have, in some respect, gotten past that. And I think it was through this experience I had early on at XPN, listening to this diversity of music, and then playing the music on the air. I'd have to have a well-rounded set of music on Diaspar. In the beginning, I would have to include music that I didn't like. And that's kind of not the point of being a DJ, is it? If you're going to be a DJ at a college community radio station, you want to get on and play just all your favorite music, right? Well, I couldn't do that at XPN. I had to play, Harry Parch, or John, what's that guy, Mulhall Abrams, you know, Levels and Degrees of Light, or like some weird, you know, music from Bali, but I had to make it all fit in with the music that I liked, you know, the punk music or the prog music or whatever. It was great. It's interesting to think back, because when I first came to WXPN in 1980, Kimberly Haas was the music director, and she had amazing contacts with record labels over in Europe and in the United States, and distribution services that handled, you know, outside music. I don't know if anybody uses that term anymore, but that's one of the ways to refer to some of these really obscure recordings, and they were hard to find back in those days, in the 80s, when to find music I could just go to the WXPN studio and go to the new release stack, you know, the shelf, and there would be like 3 feet of new albums, and I would spend you know, after I had a day job, or I think I actually, yeah, I started here while I was still going to college at Temple University. And so after classes, I would come here and try to go through the library. And even after I graduated, I was gainfully employed, and so my evenings I would spend here at XPN, at the old studio, the old building on Spruce Street, combing through the library and taking notes. So I would find music back then by coming to the station and going through the record bin, the shelves of records, and going through the various libraries and checking the playlist book. Each DJ wrote down a playlist as they did their show. Their shows were live, and they were just improvised sets of music, just off the cuff sets of music, you know, that people would put together on the fly. And they would, as they're playing albums, they would write down what albums and what tracks they played, and I could find out, you know, I could go look these albums up in the library then, and that helped my buying habits too. I bought an amazing amount of albums at the various record shops in Philadelphia, and I even worked at a record shop called Jerry's Records, and I was able to, you know, buy albums through them. I was able to order stuff, and because most of the music that we were using for Diaspar and for Star's End on WXPN back in the 1980s was non-mainstream music, so it would have been odd to find any of these albums that I was really looking for or interested in a mainstream, you know, mall record shop, you know. So I had to would order them, you know, through the catalog or whatever. So I would also listen to the other DJs on the air and take notes about what they played when they got on the mic to announce what they had played. And if I didn't catch something, I could actually find the person and ask them face to face, like, what was that? You know, explain to me who this person is, who this person or that person is, or and also back in those days, that was often how we learned about music here at WXPN, about among the Diaspar and Star's End DJs, was just through the camaraderie of our you know, the friendships that we developed through the staff. I'm 58 years old now, and I've been on the air doing Star's End for 35 years, and as of this year, 2016, Star's End is 40 years old. That's a really long time. And I guess having all said that, I don't know what it means. I think someone else will have to tell me what it means. I think it's good. I think it's a good thing, but I don't know what it means. There are no I don't know if there are very few equivalents to this. There's a program called Music from the Hearts of Space, but it's really a lot different than Star's End. The way it's produced and the way people use it. And it's also a syndicated show, so Well, I really shouldn't comment about the program. I'm not well versed in its content, but it seems like if you do a syndicated program that's meant for worldwide or at least national consumption, the program has to be more generic than a program like Star's End, where it's a live program over the air and it's a local DJ like myself coming in and and talking about local concerts, or like, oh, here's a soundtrack. I went to see this movie last week downtown, and bought the album, bought the soundtrack album, and I want to play a track from it on the air, And so it's a different experience. I don't know if they're the same or mutually exclusive, or one's better than the other, but they are different things. And so, I don't know. We'll have to do an interview with someone else to find out what Star's End means. And I think it would be interesting to find out what Star's End means to the listeners and to the musicians and to, I don't know if even any radio professionals know about it or would have anything to comment, would have any comments on it. But I am so focused on producing the show. It takes a long time to get the show together because each song that I choose to be part of the playlist has to be like meticulously fit into. I try to make like 5 1-hour sets, and so in order to make the music flow evenly and easily, and with relationships, try to show relationships between each track. It takes a long time, and sometimes it might take 5 or 10 hours for me just to plan out the show. I think it would be interesting to find out what people think about the music. Now, it might be hard to find out because, by and large, I don't think people talk about this music very much to one another, or talk about the show very much, or I don't hear them, or I'm not privy to these kind of conversations. And so it could be something about the nature of the person that listens to this show, that they are just not real talkative. It's like Robert Rich said, via David Allen, we're a community of hermits. So there may be many people out there in the radio listenership getting a really good experience out of it, but they just don't care to talk about it, or maybe it's too difficult to explain to friends and family what is going on. Like, what is this? What's the nature of this show? And I think that might be like something that Star's End has to contend with that a normal radio show doesn't. Like if you listen to This American Life or Fresh Air. If you're standing at the water cooler at work, you can say, oh, I heard, Tom York on Fresh Air the other day. Or I heard, this interesting story about, they had an interesting Halloween special show on This American Life, and you can explain about what is happening. But you can't go in and say, like, hey, I listened to this show for 5 hours, and it just blew my mind. It, took me to, the furthest reaches of the oral universe. And I'm sure your coworkers would go like, oh, well, that's nice, or I don't know what they would say. But I'm so focused on doing the show and then coming in to air the show and just trying to stay awake all night and not mess up and that I have very little interaction with the listeners. I know they're out there. I've gotten the ratings. The ratings books or whatever they call them, every now and then I'll find out how many people are listening. I know there's a significant number of people listening to the show, or at least tuning in for a little while. But other than, running into people at concerts or during the fundraiser, we usually do very well during the fundraiser with lots of people calling in and making a, substantial making our show goals and stuff, or even going over them. So that's a sign that people are enthusiastic about the radio show. But anyway, my point is, I think that would be an interesting study to try to find out what people are doing with the show, what's happening when they listen, and what they get out of it. And I can't be the one that does that, because I would influence any of the answers or any of the replies that I would get. It would have to be like some outside organization or some outside person to go through and undertake this. So I guess I don't see that happening, so I guess we'll never really find out. the short answer about like what is Star's End, the short answer is like to someone who's uninitiated, I would say, well, you turn it on when you go to bed on Saturday night, and it helps you sleep, or it's something that you can have on in the background while you sleep. And I think a lot of people do that, but that's really not the intent of the show. The intent of the show is to make your Saturday night more interesting. And you might have to give up a whole night of sleep, or it's a different kind of nighttime hour. The wee hours, they're different. And I hope people will use that for, they'll make up their own reason, or their own purpose, and they'll get their own point to listening. I think also, since broadcast radio has gotten much more conservative over the years, I think Star's End is very good because it acts as a way to air new music, like new music by independent artists. It's in the context of this floating or flowing 5-hour soundscape, but much of it is new music. It's stuff that other radio shows might not, or other radio stations or other programs won't find fits in with their format. And so it's an outlet for new music, but it makes a big thing out of a lot of small things. What's that called? Synergy, where it's bigger than the sum of something is bigger, or something is larger than the sum of its parts. And I look at that as another aspect of what Star's End is. It's by making all these 10, 20, or 30 tracks, or however many tracks wind up in a 5-hour broadcast, they're really not all separate tracks. It's the Star's End show. Now I think it's good to find out, well, I would like it if listeners showed some curiosity about who the musicians were who were releasing this music. But on the other hand, it's also good not to worry too much about that, to just like sit back and take in the experience and just hear this music coming and enjoy these the ebb and flow and the arc and the contour. Some sets get like a real high energy level, and other sets are there's a lot of ups and downs, but nothing is very abrupt at all. I try to put it together in an intelligent manner so that it makes sense, or it seems, I guess that's like a personal aesthetic that I developed over the years. I wouldn't know how to explain it, or there's no school to go to explain like how to do this. I don't think there is, and I think that I think possibly that's one of the unique attributes of Star's End is that craft, and maybe you can even call it an art, to putting the program together in this manner every week. It's new every week. One of the main reasons I still come in to do the show is that I have a lot of respect for, the show, or the spirit of the show. I don't know how to explain it other than that. There's like, there's something else besides all the music and everything. There's like, what do you call it, the zeitgeist or something like that. There's just some aesthetic that I want to, I don't know how to explain it. I don't want it to fade away, to disappear, to vanish. So I really, well, it's not an effort. I mean, I really like doing the show, and so I don't really have any soul searching or anything about coming in every week to do the show. It's fine. I really enjoy it, and I get a lot out of it, and I hope the listening audience does too. I think when I first started doing the show all by myself, just me every week, I think I was doing the soul searching then as to the points of, am I going to be good enough to do it every week? Is the show going to sound interesting is it going to sound new every week, or is it going to, am I going to like, and also physically and you know, is my stamina going to hold up? And I was in a relationship then. I was wondering if that was going to hold up as well. And so there was, you know, I don't ever think about those things anymore. It's just a really natural, really positive part of my life. So I you know, I do everything I can to keep it happening. You know, to keep it worthwhile and relevant. And I think it is I think Star's End is definitely still relevant today, just as much as it was in 1976 when it first came on the air. Maybe it's even more relevant today, because the for the 5 hours that Star's End is on, between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m., Saturday night, Sunday morning, nothing is asked of the listener. There's no commercials or adverts. There's no underwriting spots. There's just this music. And I'm hoping that listeners will get the point, or feel like it's like a personal space where they can do whatever they want. And there's no news reports, there's no news flashes, there's no traffic reports, there's no weather reports, it's not an exchange of information. It's a really creative use of the radio.